Hey, Align Online, welcome. We are so excited to spend another Tuesday at noon with you. I just need to start with a confession. Last week, I wasn't able to hear the music for that video, and this week, as the music played, like my anticipation, oh, it was epic. That was cool. We're here again with Josh Boyer and Graylin Griffin. I love you guys. I'm excited to have you on today. And this week, we are going to continue our dive into the culture map. So there are 5 traits that define our worldview. Our worldview, when we come together, shapes our culture. And we know that all of those things are key to unlocking our purpose. And so we're excited to dive into traditions this week. But first, another confession. This is just my confessional. I lied to you last week, Graylin, and I apologize. I told you that I would share my life experience in the chat below. And then my life experience overwhelmed me, and I never got around to it.
Well, there's still time. There's still time. I wasn't expecting it to happen right then. You can share it at any time.
I was, and I've been fuming about it.
I'm just waiting all week.
The surface all week. I actually had to leave the state. I couldn't even take it anymore.
I drove all the way to Michigan.
I was like, I'm crossing borders to get away from my pent up anger against Zach. So
I apologize, Josh. This is an authentic community, you guys. We all do build this culture together, and you are welcome to hold me accountable. So if it's okay, we're just going to take a quick minute to share that life experience now.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So in reflecting, in quarantine, when we have a lot of family coming in to visit, I was thinking back about just some of my childhood experiences and how they shape me even today. Now, when I look at my work experience today, I think one of the things that gives me a strategic advantage is there's really no problem or hurdle that I can't overcome. Like I can hack, or I can overcome, I can find a solution, or I can find somebody to make it happen. And I think a lot of that comes from just spending a lot of time in time out. When I was a kid, like you just stuck in the corner and you have to make your own fun. I remember like building and setting up all my action figures, and I didn't have anybody to play with because I'm the oldest by 5 years, and then it's girls after me. And so they would never play action. But I would set it all up, and then I would tear it all down. And I would set it all up, and I would tear it all down. And I think something in those experiences stuck with me, where I love building, I love creating, I love coming up with innovative ideas to solve a problem. So
that is cool.
That's awesome, man.
Well,
it gives us some insight into your personality as well, like and the way you show up at work. Because I'm like, I've seen him do that. I've seen him create something out of a unique situation, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and Zach's always like when we're in the when we're ideating on like how do we do this next thing, or how do we solve this problem. Zach's always just kind of there politely in the corner, listens to everybody, and then is like, we could do that, but we could also try building it this way, and then throws out something, and we're all like, yeah, that's better.
That's a better idea.
My other takeaway from that story is that we just need to be really, hardcore, stern, and put Zach in timeout to get the best ideas flowing. So
hey, that might just work.
Also, side note, when you were put timeout as a kid, you were given toys.
I was like,
I was
thinking the same thing.
Looking back, I probably stashed them knowing I'm going to timeout, and I was just preparing. When you know you're going to get a spanking, so you put on multiple layers of underwear.
Yes.
That's strategic thinking. That was developed through life experiences.
Preparation. There you go. Zach is always prepared. Well, yeah, that is hilarious, but a really great reference point to just life experiences and how they just subconsciously completely shape the way we show up in conversations and the way we show up at work. And we are constantly contributing, adding, shaping, influencing the culture of our team and organization, even when we're not thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And it's because of those past experiences and a whole lot more. So as we look at this definition of culture, like Zach was pointing out, we're talking about the sum total of people's hopes and experiences, their traditions, their preferences, and their beliefs. And these are things that, again, are 5 common traits, not the only things, but we're talking about 5 common traits that just we subconsciously add to the culture of a team. Last week we talked about experiences, and Zach just caught us up with his. And thanks for following through and adding to the conversation from last week, Zach. So last week when we dove deep into experiences, we talked about three things as a takeaway. And we talked about how past experiences shape who we are and they influence how we react in the current moment. We talked about how they expand beyond just what happened, an event that happened, and more about how we felt about that event, and how our emotions actually are probably what carry on with us long term more than the nitty-gritty details. And then we talked about how recognizing our own life experiences and the way those have shaped us actually help us to better understand how to lead other people. And recognizing other people's experiences and how their experiences have shaped them help us to better serve them. So that's just a quick recap. You can go back and watch that one if you want to dig into experiences. And so we thought today what would be a great kind of next step in the conversation, especially after Graylin dropped this genius observation in the conversation last week when he said that it's really our past experiences that become our present expectations. And so we were like, wow, that's actually a perfect segue into the topic of today, which is traditions. So yeah, I don't know, I can't remember if we put that quote up there or not from Graylin from last week, but anyway, our past experiences.
Beautiful. It'll be like the Maya Angelou quote, but
yeah, okay. So our past experiences become our present expectations, and that has a lot to do with how we define traditions. So I'll turn it over to you, Graylin.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. As you guys were breaking it down last week, I was kind of sitting here trying to process and make my own connections, and that thought kind of just came up, and it's like that. I think that is why when we show up and there's either conflict or tension or even positive things, it's because I came in with an expectation. And this definition that we're going to discuss today of traditions and how it fits into the culture that is already in place and the culture that we're trying to create really extends that. So thanks for the setup. Let's look at this definition today. It's a pretty lengthy definition, and I kind of broke it down this way, and I'll read it to you guys. That traditions are an automatic response to circumstances that we feel an internal conviction or obligation to repeat. And these behaviors usually begin as a preference that proves successful in one moment that we attempt to repeat and apply to circumstances going forward. These responses repeated over time eventually become the right way or the only way to do things. And then, like, to sum up the last part, our preferences take into account current circumstances and we can adapt, but our traditions are things we're committed to recreating this past experience that we, again, have now adopted as the right way or the only way. So that's a lot of information. So what I want to do really quickly is I just want to kind of go line by line. I love the way Zach broke this down for us in the visual. And so it really helps with the understanding. Kind of going back to this idea of experiences then creating expectations. When I first heard this definition, and understanding that the behavior that I thought was a preference in the beginning, and was a preference in the beginning, it was successful. And there's something about doing something a certain way, especially successfully, that makes me want to do it again, and then again and again and again. And then from there, because I found success, it becomes my way or the way. And I bring that into every environment, whether it's cooking. I've been making my own vegan pancakes lately, and so I'm really obsessed with doing it a certain way. Same thing, COVID has just made us cook at home. And I find myself looking over my wife's shoulder thinking or even saying it out loud, I wouldn't do it that way. I would saute these onions,
Ooh,
and so
Oh, that's dangerous.
I know.
That is dangerous.
But it's because I've done it and found success that it's become the way. And this is the part of this definition that I just meant. It resonates specifically in a professional environment.
Yeah.
But our preference take into account the current circumstances and they adapt. But our traditions are things we're committed to recreating because of that past experience where we found the success. And I love this little sub point at the very end. These oftentimes are difficult to let go or to change.
Mhm.
They're difficult to let go or to change. So think about any time you've started a new job, or you walked into a new work environment, or you started working with a new team, and you've had success in your previous position, or you saw some things maybe that weren't positive in your previous role or position, but you come in with these expectations or a tradition, a way of doing things that you want to see implemented in this new environment. So the purpose of talking about this today is we're really trying to unpack at a very high level how these 5 traits, these traits that we focus on, not the only traits, but these 5 traits that we focus on, create that culture. And now drilling down a little bit further to the individual and how we can identify those things about ourselves, recognize that other people have those, and the fact that they do create the culture that we either exist in or we want to see created. So I love this definition, and it's really powerful. And again, so I'm glad we get to talk about it today. So
yeah, and when we think of the word traditions, we're kind of branching off of what I would say probably most people are familiar with. When they would hear the word traditions, they would probably define it in a very different way, right? Usually when we're talking, if you talk about the word culture and then you immediately talk about the word traditions, usually people are going to approach that from like this anthropological angle where you're looking at a culture's like what do they celebrate, and what do they celebrate annually, and what have they chosen to do, with seasons and holidays, and even like symbolic meaning of certain things. Right. And so in even organizations and businesses, we do these kinds of things too. We have our annual company picnic, or we have our monthly team lunch day, or sometimes even teams can formulate traditions around certain things that are just like inside jokes or things like that just sort of then evolve and grow. Like around our office, like how many times has the flat Chris been passed around the office or used, right? You think about like someone, I don't even know where it came from, but years ago someone took our founder's face, a full body picture of him, and then got it printed on a piece of stand-up cardboard, life-size image of Chris, and it just gets floated around the office, and it still just gets passed around and freaks people out sometimes. But anyway, life-size. These funny little like inside jokes. So we're not really talking about traditions in that sense. We're not talking about the things that people plan or set on the calendar. We're talking about, again, the subconscious. We're talking about the things that naturally come out that we don't really have control over. They're just there, but we got to identify them and unpack them. So Graylin, I appreciate you walking through that line by line to kind of show that these are things that were like, you had some past experience and it really shaped you. And now you're trying to recreate that. And so it's this thing you just do over and over. You're trying to recreate something, or you're trying to do it the right way, because that's what, proved right in the past. And so these are things that are, they're not just difficult to let go of. I think sometimes impossible to let go of, right?
Sure.
So, so that's what we're trying to differentiate here. We're trying to say, what are the things that we just all subconsciously do and we're not even aware of it?
Right.
So.
Yeah, I know. So let me take a stab. Okay, I'll throw what might be some of my traditions, and you tell me if this fits the description.
Okay.
Every morning I wake up and I stumble to my fridge and I like crack open my Bang energy drink. I take a sip, I get ready, I finish it by the time I get to work, and then like I'm ready to go. Is that a tradition?
According, like if we're looking at our definition, I think like that still can kind of fit in that realm of, for some reason, that particular habit has proven to be for you, right. Maybe like I have to do this. It's the only way to get ready for my day, right?
Yeah.
It's like
then I'm ready to show up. And I know that on Tuesdays, like I'm going to come into the office and I've had my Bang and I'm ready to show up. And then we're going to come together as a team. Like that's our one in-office day right now in this crazy season. And so that's when I do any collaborative type meetings that I need to handle.
Yeah.
And I prep for AO and I break down from AO. And then I know I'm going to be able to have my introvert time on Wednesday or Friday. So does that fit our definition of traditions?
I think so. I think, yeah, go ahead, Graylin.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the key thing, and Josh, you hit it, is that it was a preference. Like you prefer to have a Bang energy drink in the morning because it helps you, get the energy you need to be productive in this work environment. It's something that was successful, and that you've decided to now do on a repeated basis over and over. And that's for the individual, for you specifically. Now, if for something changes, like for some reason something changed and you did not get that and it impacted you and you showed up differently,
that would impact my team and the culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You just hit it, Graham. That's you said the word I was going to say, and the word is change. So I think it would be highlighted as a tradition if you were asked to change that habit or that routine and what you experienced the moment you were asked to change it. So your wife is like, you know what, Zach, your morning routine just isn't working for us as a family anymore. And here's what I think you're going to have to do instead. I mean, what are you going to experience in that moment, Zach, if you're asked to change that, or if you're asked to change, hey, we're not just doing one day in the office. We're actually going to be doing, 5 days a week, and you're going to lose some of that introvert so like solo time where you can kind of get work done but still be feeling recharged. So the second someone proposes the idea to change those routines, what do you experience?
Initially I think I reel back. I want to control, right? Because these have proven successful for me, and at that point I have to figure out a way to be able to communicate what my needs are in a way that still meets the needs of the team. And so thinking about those examples, like coming to work on Tuesdays, I know that our team is now forming culture and traditions based on, that tradition that we show up on Tuesdays. So we're going to have a team lunch, and that's going to develop the culture that we have, which is work-life integration. I want to know you guys, and I want to work alongside you guys. I want to, be in relationship with my teammates. Also, if Tuesdays were not to happen, if I wasn't to come in, then I know that my team would miss out because they're starting to depend on that also, that collaborative time. Like it's something we're all establishing together.
That's good. So I think those kinds of traditions that we form, like in and of themselves, they're not good, they're not bad, they're not positive, negative. I mean, they're neutral. They just are. They're things that are unique to you. But this is kind of what we're doing in this discussion. But this is where I think, and what we're proposing teams really need to do. You need to identify these things, have an awareness of these things, pull these things to the surface. Push yourself to have an awareness of how everyone uniquely shows up and everyone's unique traditions, because whether you're conscious of it or not, they're shaping the culture of your team. They're either helping you to better live out your purpose, or they're distracting you or pulling you away. But how will you know unless you kind of get in and explore those and say, what are our traditions? What should they be? There's times where what you're kind of suggesting, Zach, is let's just have a really thorough, honoring, conversation with one another and explore these things. And I might need to adjust some of my traditions. And then there's other times where we're like, actually, this new tradition that we just organically formed is actually, we've discovered that to be really positive. Let's keep that going. This is a good way to do it. Or you might discover that in a teammate, I guess, like, hey, I like the way you do that, and keep it going.
Yeah, it's creating a shared expectation. So my team knows that on Tuesdays they have access to me. Yeah. And it also caters to my preferences, because on Wednesdays I can go and just plow away on some things that, just need my attention, need me to get away from everything else.
You guys got my mind just racing. I just had this thought, and we can move forward because we're gonna talk about like what this looks like for us. But I just had this just kind of aha moment, a reminder that culture cannot be built on tradition alone.
Yeah.
It's so important that culture is built on purpose. And this is way kind of heady, high level. But I was just thinking about all of the things, all of the team lunches and the outings that came to a halt at the shelter in place and stay at home mandates and COVID and all these things. And man, what has that done to a lot of organizations, including ours? Because there's places and experiences that we are so accustomed to, and they become traditions, and they've been really successful. But man, when something is now thrown in that forces you to change, how strong is the culture? So
I love
you
that
guys are killing me. I love it.
ability to pivot. Like this is a process, right? Like that's what that speaks. When COVID happened, how do we still have unity and shape culture?
Right.
Are we willing to change our traditions?
Yeah. I think I like the phrase of like anything that comes to your mind is like, but that's the way we've always done it.
Right.
Is a tradition that can be, really hard to let go of. And I think I think that's definitely, what every organization has experienced. But we weren't given a choice. It's not like COVID came and quarantine came and it was like, no, now what would you like to do about this? What would be your preference and how would you like to spend your time? It was like, no, everyone stay home now, so it was forced change. And so we were all kind of sitting there going, well, that's not the way we've ever done it. Yeah. So it has kind of like stirred up those thoughts. So I think, there's a lot of things that come to mind that I think every organization and team has probably experienced in this season. But when we get to a more like micro level to like the individual, there's even ways that like, so here, my personal example, from my training in coaching, leadership and executive coaching, and my background in that, and working with now over 200 clients now, one-on-one, I've gotten into like sort of a rhythm, and even what I was trained to do, and my rhythm for how I even facilitate 1 hour. So usually if I'm coaching, I'm on the clock, and so is the client. And we're like, okay, this is a 60-minute conversation. How do we get the most out of this 60 minutes? So it's a pretty somewhat like, it's a structured time, even though the goal is to facilitate in a way that doesn't feel structured. It's kind of an art and a science to it.
Yeah.
But I got so used to structuring. Okay, here's how a meeting could run. Let's have a very clear agenda. Let's have a very focused conversation. Let's not get off topic. Let's really safeguard that, and let's end with a very clear, like, actionable who's doing what by when, and even a summary. Let's even summarize, like, here's what we got out of this. Here's what we learned, and now here's who's doing what. And so you always have to preserve, if you've got 60 minutes on the clock, you always have to reserve, like, okay, the last 10 to 15 minutes needs to be time for that kind of like, let's do some summary and summarize our learning, summarize our takeaways, and agree upon who's doing what and when we're going to meet next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got very into that structured nature to like, man, you can, if you only got 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you can get a lot out of it if you really manage it well. And so I came into meetings, team time with that same kind of tradition. And that's been really hard for me to let go of that. That's not how everybody would like to spend the time,
Yeah.
That's a hard thing for me to pull myself out of regarding my traditions. So
yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah.
So Graylin, like working on a team with Josh, your preference is probably people-centered, like probably more laid back. You come from the church world where the tradition is probably more laid back. Meetings might be less structured. You kind of just go with the spirit. And so how do you guys come together to form a team culture that is efficient, successful, and like leads towards purpose in a way that both of you guys feel fulfilled?
That's a great question, man. When I stepped in, I came on at our company. Josh was already here, and I think one of the things that really helped us to align early is a lot of dialogue. Josh really introduced himself as an invested, inquisitive counterpart. Like, he was interested in where I came from. He was interested, and I'm likewise. I was the same way. Like, I want to know your background, and so because of that, I got to hear about his work experiences, and I got to actually see how he did things as just observing. But it was dialogue. It was taking time to hear about his work experiences, and it was also really one of my favorite experiences with Josh. I'm gonna tell the story. Is we were working on a project, and I didn't know the specific tradition that Josh shared, a work tradition, work experience, because he found a lot of success in it. He was breaking down, laying out a plan of action, or I forget exactly what we were discussing, but he was laying out like an agenda, things we were working on, even asking for feedback about something that he had created. And just my, I'm listening, but I'm also doing something else, way of showing up in a meeting. I wasn't connecting with Josh with my eyes. And Josh surprised me because he stopped what he was doing and he just shared openly, like, "Hey man, I don't really feel like you're listening to me because you're looking down doing something else." And I feel like that was the moment where we became best friends. Because I was so appreciative of him just being so honest, because like we talked about, his experiences, his preferences had created this expectation that I was not, delivering on, and I would not have known if he had not have shared that. And so this is where now our worldviews, our personal preferences, traditions, experiences are colliding.
Yeah.
And it would have been a negative work experience for the next 2 years if he hadn't been that open and taken the time to share that with me. And on the other side, me, as a person who values that people-centered work environment, to know that about him so that I can show up differently going forward. So I think the root of it is these types of conversations, these types of questions, intentional time to get to know the people you're working beside, to create the culture you want.
It's huge. I would say, just really quick, my through the lens through which I saw that experience in that event, was also Graylin's incredible ability to receive me just like right there in front of another teammate too, kind of confronting this moment, and Graylin just like super honoring and receptive, just like, "Wow, yeah, you're right. Okay, I'm listening now." And then later after that time, we talked about it even extensively, like processing what we both experienced in that. But the other thing is how Graylin's influenced me is that Graylin, even though, church background, yes, but school background too, teacher, administrator in a school, which is on the clock all the time, man. You've got, it's a very rigid clock-oriented schedule in a school setting. And yet Graylin comes in with this leadership ability that's like able to be like, whoa, there's a moment we need to, the people on the team really matter. And I've seen Graylin, I've seen the value that it can do to a team in an organization, bring to a team in an organization when the leader is like, yeah, we did set this as the agenda for the next 60 minutes. However, that's not as important as what you just brought up. Let's all just pause and talk about that for a moment. And I've witnessed Graylin do that, and I've been like, wow, because I can get, what the story I told, I get very tunnel vision, and it can be hard for me to stray from like, no, our goal is to really extrapolate everything we could out of this 60 minutes. Let's stay focused. And Graylin can be really good about being like, well, hold on, like, you're not gonna get this person or these two people's full participation in where you want to go anyway until they talk about that thing that is weighing heavy on them right now. So let's talk about that. And so I feel like we've kind of influenced each other, like,
yes, for
both
sure,
ways, like out of our traditions, I guess, into into a unity, I think, around purpose. Because at the end of the day, I always know that Graylin and I have the same. We're just really deeply unified in the purpose, and that, I think, that enables these kinds of conversations. So,
yeah, I hope that answers. How does that answer sit with you, Zach? Does that kind of answer the question, or what do you think, man?
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I think that gives us some practical application, so we can see how we both show up. We recognize not only our worldview, but our traditions, our preferences, and we recognize the worldview of others. and then we're able to come together and develop a culture together that serves our purpose. Love it. You guys killed it.
Cool. Did we get a question posed in the?
We did. From the
Okay.
one and only Caitlin Tenney. She just wanted to know, what is the difference? Like, how do you distinguish between a habit and a tradition?
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So I think that goes back to us like saying we're kind of rewrote the definition of traditions from what people are used to, and we are kind of looking at it more from like these habitual things we do because of past experiences, and I think other of the 5 common traits shape it too. So I would say tradition maybe more in terms of like agreed upon ritual. So a tradition, like, because we've redefined it, I would say an organization comes together to say, hey, we're going to make this a company tradition. I would say, okay, that's kind of like a ritual and a thing that the organization does. But what we're talking about is something probably more closer to like the things we subconsciously, unconsciously, like habitually do, because we've been shaped by these past experiences. So that's how I would kind of differentiate it. Like the company picnic every summer is maybe more of a ritual. That's something people do with a lot of awareness. They plan it and they, formulate it. We're talking about these things that we almost can't control. They're just a part of us without even knowing it.
I think too, like a tradition has usually like a group experience or a shared experience connotation. Like, and I think the definition that we've like crafted still encompasses that. And I think a habit oftentimes is like maybe something I do as an individual, but like you used earlier, Zach, like, breakfast or coffee or lunch is something that you experience, you do that then impacts like kind of how we experience work in a professional environment as a team. You know what I'm saying? So like I'm the same way, and I know other team members are the same way. Like, coffee, breakfast or something needs to be consumed so we can show up. And we've often like talked about our brews and different things like that. But I think a habit is more like the individual, something maybe that you do. But traditions are more of like a shared experience. So all of these habits, if we're sharing in those, like kind of become that tradition of the way we do things. And oftentimes we want to relive that. We want to recreate that wherever we go. So,
Yeah, I love it. Like a habit might be me making my cup of coffee at home, and it does affect culture. But a tradition might be we all show up on Tuesdays and do this together, knowing that intentionally develops culture. I love redefining traditions because I'm all about bucking tradition. Like as a kid, if you didn't hear that in my life experience earlier, I'm all about it. I love that traditions don't just have to be a corporate Christmas party at the end of the year where Karen from accounting drinks a little too much and dances a little too hard. Like, we can use these traditions, we can recognize these traditions to really live our purpose in a way that we all experience fulfillment together.
That's
so
good.
This is
Well,
good.
If you're enjoying this conversation and you want to go deeper into discussing traditions and how that shapes the culture of your team, find a little bit more about what kinds of things you add to a team, and dig out the things in your teammates that they just, naturally bring, we've got a great tool for you called the Culture Map. You can find it on our website. Your team takes this together. It helps you to just quickly answer a few questions that start to pull out your a few of these elements of the 5 common traits of worldview, and you get a quick little assessment in our digital workbook for your team. But in that workbook, there's questions to take you deeper, like what we've done today in discussion. So if you have enjoyed that and you think that would be a really helpful, just kind of time well spent for you and your team, we think it would be, jump over to alignleadthrive.com/culture-map. And from there you can sign up for your team to take the Culture Map and get these workbooks to start having your own discussions about what are the traditions that we all naturally bring, and how do we want to approach them now? Are they pushing us toward our purpose? Are they distracting us at times? Are there ones that do we need to learn from each other? Do we need to be influenced by one another? And how do we just keep driving toward creating a culture that we all feel fulfilled? So please check that out. Also, another quick plug for our read-along book study of the new edition of Align. 4 simple steps for leaders to create a culture of fulfillment. Right here on Align Online on our Facebook page, click on units, scroll down where you can find unit 2, which is a read along. You'll hear from the author himself and with some kind of a introduction to each chapter. And then you can see we've got some discussion going there and just forming community around what we're all learning together on these topics of leadership and culture and things like that. So 2 great resources there for you, the culture map and the read along with the book that you can get plugged into. And more to come next week as we continue our conversation on next Tuesday, and we'll talk about the next trait. I don't think we've nailed it down what we'll talk about next, but we've talked about experiences and traditions so far, and we'll see what we tackle next week here on Align Online.
I really hope it's I can't wait. See you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
All right,
Thanks
bye.
again.